In this update, I'll summarize The Optimistic Child by Martin Seligman for you. This book is 264 pages long, and I'll distill its essence. How to teach children the skills of optimism so they can lead optimistic lives in about 26 minutes. Let's start with a scenario. Peter, after not doing well on a math test, comes home from school and says, "I'll never be good at math. I always fail, and I'm the dumbest in my class." As a parent, what would you do? Some parents might comfort the child by saying, "Your dad and I aren't great at math either, so maybe you're just not cut out for it." Others might blame the child by saying, "Why are you so dumb? You're hopeless." Notice how these negative responses from parents can exacerbate the child's pessimistic thoughts, leading them to despair and give up. What should parents do to dispel a child's pessimism and encourage them to keep trying? This book offers answers. The author of this book, Martin Seligman, is the father of positive psychology. He shifted the focus of psychology from people's flaws to their strengths and virtues, advocating for psychology to strive to improve people's happiness. Unlike superficial parenting books, this book's conclusions stem from Seligman's 30-plus years of research involving thousands of adults and children, underpinned by solid theory and numerous case studies. One of Seligman's most important psychological discoveries is the theory of learned helplessness. In simple terms, it's the feeling that no matter what one does, they won't succeed, developed through repeated failure. In our hypothetical scenario, the parent's response could very likely cause learned helplessness in the child. If you consistently fail in one area, you might give up on trying. You might also start doubting yourself, thinking, "I'm no good at this or that." It's not that you're actually incapable. Rather, you've fallen into the psychological trap of learned helplessness. What are the consequences of this mindset? It leads to a pessimistic explanatory style. Whenever something bad happens, you'll analyze the cause with this negative mindset, blaming yourself, imagining permanent bad effects that will affect all aspects of your life. This pessimistic thinking becomes a self-imposed shackle that robs you of the courage and confidence to keep trying. Moreover, this explanatory style develops in childhood and persists for a lifetime if left unchecked. This pessimistic mindset can significantly impact a child's mental and physical health, including increasing the risk of depression. Pessimistic children won't love life as much because they struggle to build a sense of achievement and lack confidence in facing challenges. This is something no parent wants to see. We covered the ABCD model for learning optimism, which involves understanding your interpretation of negative events, recognizing the consequences of this thinking, and then refuting your negative thoughts with evidence to find solutions that benefit you. Once parents master optimism, they can pass this positive thinking style on to their children. In this audio, I'll explain how to help your child learn the skills of optimism. Part 1. Let's start by examining common mistakes parents make when fostering optimism in their children. The first mistake is directly instilling confidence in the child. First, let's define control behavior. This refers to the ability to control outcomes through effort, such as learning to speak, walk, or dress oneself. Children start developing control behavior from birth. It's key to preschoolers forming an optimistic mindset. Building control behavior helps them establish the habit of not backing down in the face of difficulties. By ages 5 or 6, children have begun thinking about cause and effect. They develop theories about why they fail or succeed and about how to turn failure into success. This theoretical framework forms the foundation for future optimism, and parents play a crucial role in this process. Take this example. Tom is a 6-year-old boy who has already developed a pessimistic mindset because he feels he's never as good as his sister. One day, Tom and his sister were building with blocks. His sister was building a rocket. Tom copied his sister's moves, But he couldn't keep up because his sister moved too fast. He grew increasingly agitated. Each time he knocked down the blocks and restarted, he grew angrier. Eventually, he threw the blocks at his sister. Tom's father tried to console him, praising him as the best rocket maker. But Tom was still upset, saying his sister was better than him at everything. That his rocket's wings kept falling off. That he hated building blocks. And that he felt he was bad at everything. Tom's father, not wanting to see his son upset, stepped in to build a nice rocket for Tom. Looking at this exchange, what do you think was wrong with Tom's father's approach? His approach was better than the examples mentioned earlier, but he still made a mistake. He tried to instill self-esteem directly in his child. This approach is flawed and can actually backfire. Why is this the case? First, nearly everything the father said was untrue. Tom knew he couldn't keep up with his sister no matter how hard he tried. The father should have been honest and explained that when Tom turns 9, like his sister, he'll be able to build sturdier things. He could have also explained that when his sister was 6, her work was similar to Tom's. Then, to cheer Tom up, the father built something for Tom that he couldn't do himself. The father sent the message that when things don't go your way, you should give up and let someone else rescue you. This effectively teaches Tom helplessness. Failure itself isn't scary. What's scary is teaching children to be habitually helpless. William James, the father of modern psychology, proposed 2 concepts related to self-esteem: feeling satisfied and performing satisfactorily. Feeling satisfied means believing one has the right to be happy and enjoy the fruits of one's labor. Performing satisfactorily means believing in one's ability to handle daily challenges. James argued that you can't bypass satisfactory performance to gain satisfaction directly. In other words, when a child hasn't developed the ability to take control, adding confidence to them directly can reduce their self-esteem. Only by facing challenges and overcoming setbacks can one gain self-esteem and a sense of joy. So, Tom's father reversed the cause and effect, trying to instill confidence directly in his child. Parents shouldn't encourage children to feel satisfied, but should instead teach them how to perform satisfactorily, so they gain control skills. Jessie did a great job of helping her child gain control. She noticed her 1-year-old son often climbed into the corner behind the couch, and even though she tried to block the passage, he'd muster all his strength to squeeze in. Each time he made it, he'd cheer joyfully as if declaring it his territory. Jessie realized her son enjoyed the challenge of climbing, so she stopped preventing his exploration like other parents might do. She would create new challenges in a safe environment, like building a castle out of old boxes and pillows, hiding a puppet inside for her son to find. When he found it, he'd clap excitedly, and Jessie would share in his pride. Through this, Jessie helped her son gain a sense of control and continually created new opportunities for him to gain more. To summarize, the first common mistake is trying to instill confidence directly in children. This approach won't help them learn optimism and may even backfire. Developing control behavior is key to preschoolers forming an optimistic mindset. Parents shouldn't just encourage children to feel satisfied. Instead, they should teach them how to perform satisfactorily, helping them gain control skills. Part 2. Let's look at the second mistake parents often make: blaming children inappropriately. Seligman says, children are like sponges. They absorb not only what you say, but also how you say it. One way to help them is to first develop your own skills in rejecting pessimism. As children hear how adults criticize them, they also absorb the method of criticism. For example, if you criticize your child for being lazy instead of not trying hard enough, the child will believe they're lazy and that their failure stems from permanent, unchangeable reasons. This way, children learn a pessimistic explanatory style from their parents. So, when criticizing your child or even yourself in front of them, avoid blaming their personality with permanent, pervasive reasons. What does this mean? Let's look at an example. Lily is a 10-year-old girl. One day, her mother took her and her 3-year-old brother to the zoo. In the car, Lily kept teasing her brother, telling him their dad belonged only to her, and scaring him with things like the zoo's lions biting off heads if he made mistakes. Lily rarely acts like this, so her mother was upset. How did this mother handle the situation? She said, "Lily, stop teasing your brother. What's wrong with you today? You're usually a great sister. You play games with him and share your toys with him, but today you're not being friendly at all. The zoo can be a scary place for little kids, and scaring him doesn't help. You know I don't like this behavior. Lily, I want you to apologize to your brother, and if you keep teasing him today, you won't be allowed to play outside after dinner. Do you understand?" This mother's criticism was ideal. Let's analyze why she was right. First, she pointed out that Lily is usually a good sister, and today's misbehavior is temporary. She used specific examples, like Lily sharing her toys with her brother, to show her issue wasn't pervasive. This helps Lily maintain her self-esteem and pride in her past good behavior. The mother also told Lily she had to apologize to her brother and warned of further punishment if she kept teasing him. She didn't blame Lily's personality, but pointed out what correct behavior looks like, avoiding labeling Lily as a naughty child. Imagine if this mother had criticized Lily for always ruining her plans, using pervasive, permanent, personalized reasons to explain her behavior. Lily would feel like a bad child, always making mistakes, and would start doubting herself, thinking her mother didn't want her anymore. This would negatively impact the formation of her personality. You also need to be mindful of the explanations you give when angry, as these can also affect your child. For example, if your car gets scratched, you might explain, "That jerk insisted on squeezing through." Or if you slam the door loudly, you might say, "I'm in a bad mood." Or if you can't find a job, you might say, "It's because of the economic downturn." These explanations attribute the causes of bad events to specific factors instead of permanent reasons, or solely your fault. This reveals your own optimistic explanatory style, which your child is listening to closely. They pick up not just the specific content of your explanation, but also your overall explanatory style, and will adopt it as their own. To summarize the second point, when criticizing your child or even yourself in front of them, be very cautious because you're shaping their explanatory style. If you inadvertently use permanent, pervasive, personalized explanations, your child will develop a pessimistic pattern. When you blame specific, changeable reasons, your child will learn optimism. So, when you notice your child has made a mistake, focus on specific, temporary reasons and avoid blaming their personality or ability. Part 3. Earlier, we discussed 2 common mistakes parents make when cultivating optimism in their children. Let's now look at specific ways to teach children to be optimistic. We previously covered the ABCD model for optimism, which also applies to children. However, kids can't understand abstract thinking like adults. So how do you help them understand the difference between optimistic and pessimistic thinking? The first step is to teach children to catch their thoughts. Catching thoughts means identifying the first thoughts that come to mind after something bad happens, like your interpretation of why it happened or your feelings about it. This isn't easy for children to grasp, so you can explain it using the story of Detective Holmes and Holmes. The story goes like this. Once upon a time, there was a little girl who rode her red bicycle to school every day. One day after school, she found her bike missing. "Where's my bike?" the girl cried. A person wearing a big hat and dressed oddly approached her, saying, "Don't be afraid. I'm the famous Detective Holmes, and I'm here to help." The girl said, "I've never heard of Holmes. I only know the famous Detective Holmes." Holmes retorted angrily, "Why does everyone confuse me with that jerk? Anyway, I know who stole your bike. The dangerous Danny." Wow. The girl exclaimed. How did you know who the thief was so quickly? Holmes replied, It's no big deal. He was the first name that came to mind, so it has to be him. With that, Holmes turned away and almost tripped over himself before disappearing. Then Holmes appeared. He removed his cloak and adjusted his hat, saying, I don't agree with that fool, Holmes. A real detective doesn't jump to conclusions based on the first name that comes to mind. I'll make a list of suspects and look for evidence to catch the thief. I'll start looking for clues now. That evening, Holmes returned with his conclusion, saying, At first, I suspected the dangerous Danny, but when I gathered evidence, I found he was punished for skipping school today and couldn't go out, so it couldn't be him. Then I thought it might be the cunning Steve, but when I gathered evidence, I found he went straight to the arcade after school, so it couldn't be him either. Later, I found a hairband belonging to the evil Betty at the spot where you parked. I then went to Betty's house, and her mother told me she had gone out riding a brand new red bicycle she claimed was a school prize for good behavior. Finally, I found her riding your bike and scaring the younger kids. The girl clapped happily. You're so much smarter than that, Holmes. After telling this story, ask your child which detective they'd prefer to help them if their bike was stolen. Have them explain why Holmes' approach is better. Help them realize that Holmes succeeded in solving the case because he made a list of suspects and found evidence to determine who the thief was. In contrast, Holmes simply trusted the first name that came to mind. Through this story, kids can understand that sometimes we think like Holmes, believing the first thought that pops into our heads when something bad happens without taking the time to assess whether it's right. You need to teach your child to identify the thoughts that pop into their head when they feel their worst. These thoughts are often hard to detect because how you think about an event happens automatically, and you assume your thoughts are inherently correct. But if someone wrongly accuses you of something you didn't do, you'll immediately defend yourself. This is the first step, catching thoughts and teaching children not to believe the first thought that comes to mind. Next, you can teach them to argue with themselves. Start by telling the story of Johnny the schoolboy, through which children can learn the technique of disputation. The story goes like this. Johnny's classmates planned to camp at the beach over the weekend, with Brian's dad driving them there. They'd even spend a night at the beach. Johnny was excited and wanted to join his friends, but when he asked his mother, she was hesitant. She worried about Brian's dad's driving skills and that the beach didn't have a phone. If something went wrong and she couldn't contact Johnny, she'd worry. In the end, she didn't let Johnny go camping. Johnny was furious and thought, I hate her. She's a witch and always does this to me, never letting me have fun. She makes me lose face in front of my friends. Pause the story here and ask your child whether Johnny's thinking is more like Holmes or Holmes and why. The child might say that Johnny's thinking is more like Holmes. Guide them to think about how a real detective like Holmes wouldn't get upset based on the first thought that came to mind. He would look for evidence. Then, finish the story to see how Johnny found evidence. He wondered if his mother really never let him have fun. Not so, because last week she let him go to the adventure park, let him go to the movies alone, and usually let him invite friends over to play video games. So, it's clear his previous thought that his mother never let him have fun wasn't true. Next, consider whether his mother's reasons for not letting him camp were valid. Johnny remembered Brian's dad had a bad driving record. He often ran red lights, had a bad temper, and had nearly hit pedestrians several times. Remembering this, Johnny felt his mother's worries were reasonable. She was also concerned about the lack of a phone at the beach. Last year, when Johnny sprained his ankle playing football, he didn't call home in time, so his mother didn't find out until late. Finally, Johnny found plenty of reasons to realize that his previous view of his mother was wrong. She wasn't deliberately working against him. Although he was still disappointed, he no longer hated his mother because he understood her reasoning. This improved his mood greatly. In the end, Johnny suggested that his parents take him to the beach and invite some friends along, which his mother agreed to. This is how you help your child learn to argue with themselves. Ask your child to recall a negative event they've experienced, like being gossiped about by classmates, being caught daydreaming in class, or having a friend cancel plans to play video games with a neighbor. Have them write down what happened and their thoughts and actions in response. This process helps them identify their ABC pattern. For example, a child might write that the bad event, A, was scoring only 70 on an English test. Their interpretation, B, might be, I'm stupid, I'll never get better, or I'm doomed, I won't get into college. Their actions, C, might be to give up. Here, explain to your child that these written thoughts are their subjective interpretations of why the bad event happened. Then have your child write down evidence refuting this thought and think of other optimistic interpretations. They can list many different explanations. For example, the evidence the child finds to counter their thoughts might be, I work hard at learning English. Every day, I spend an hour reviewing what the teacher taught and doing practice questions. I've even scored 90 before, which shows I'm not stupid. Then, guide them to think of other explanations. They might say, I didn't do well this time because I didn't prepare enough. I spent too much time playing video games in the past few days, so I didn't study enough vocabulary and phrases, which made reading comprehension difficult. In fact, one test doesn't mean my future is over. That's a bit of an exaggeration. I'm only in elementary school and college is still a long way off. There's still time to work hard. Once your child writes down this counter evidence, guide them to compare the new interpretation with their previous thoughts and note which type of thinking leads to giving up and which type of thinking encourages more effort. With that, you've taught your child the skill of disputation. Practice several times a week, with each practice lasting about 20 minutes. The next time they face a similar situation, record the negative event, thoughts, and actions. Then have your child find evidence to counter their own thinking. Through this process, your child will understand that seeing setbacks as disasters makes you give up and lose hope. All positive. Optimistic thinking encourages you to keep going. Now, let's look at the final and most important step, teaching your child to proactively mitigate negative situations. You could say that the ultimate purpose of learning optimism is to act positively and guide negative situations in a better direction. So, once your child learns to argue with themselves, you need to help them think about what to do next to mitigate the negative situation. You can read Mary's story with your child. Here's what happened. Mary borrowed a beautiful dress from her best friend, Karen, to attend a birthday party. At the party, everyone praised the dress. But somehow, when Mary got home, she found the dress covered in cream on the sleeves and chest. She tried very hard to wash it out, but it wouldn't come off. Mary was scared to tell Karen, thinking Karen would be very angry. What should Mary do? If your child is at a loss about what to do, you can explain that when something bad happens, they should think about three things. First, they should ask themselves, what's the worst thing that could happen? Then ask, what's the best thing that could happen? Finally, like Holmes, they should ask, what's the most likely thing to happen? After considering these three possibilities, they can come up with a plan for each. For instance, let your child think about what the worst thing Mary might face is. Karen might be furious and tell Mary she no longer wants to be her friend. What can Mary do to prevent the worst from happening? Your child might say, Mary could use her pocket money to buy an identical dress and return it to Karen. Next, let your child think about the best thing that might happen. Perhaps Karen won't be mad at all. What can Mary do to help ensure the best outcome? Your child might say, Mary could apologize to Karen and offer her one of her favorite dresses. Finally, have your child think about the most likely thing to happen. Perhaps Karen will be a little angry and not talk to Mary for a while. If this is the most likely outcome, ask your child how they would handle it. They might say, Mary could apologize to Karen and be extra nice to her, playing with her often. This is the final step, considering how to mitigate the situation. Let your child think of an action to prevent the worst outcome, another action to promote the best outcome, and a third action to handle the most likely situation. In conclusion, here are the steps to teach your child optimistic thinking. First, use the story of detectives Holmes and Holmes to teach your child not to believe the first thought that comes to mind. Second, help your child identify their ABC pattern by recording the negative event, their thoughts, and their actions. Tell them that these thoughts don't represent reality, and then have your child write down the evidence that counters this thinking and other optimistic interpretations. Once they write down the counter evidence, guide them to compare the new interpretation with their previous thoughts to see which kind of thinking leads to giving up and which leads to more effort, thus learning to dispute themselves. Third, help them mitigate the situation. Explain that after a negative event, they should plan an action to prevent the worst, another to promote the best, and a third to handle the most likely situation, thereby resolving the issue. Today we discussed how to cultivate optimism in children and teach them optimistic skills. Let's review. First, there are two common mistakes parents often make. The first is directly instilling confidence in the child, but this won't help them learn optimism and may even backfire. Parents shouldn't just encourage children to feel satisfied. Instead, they should teach them how to perform satisfactorily, helping them gain control skills. The second mistake is using permanent, pervasive, personalized explanatory styles when criticizing children, leading them to develop pessimistic patterns. When you notice your child has made a mistake, focus on specific, temporary reasons and avoid blaming their personality or ability. Then, to teach your child optimism, follow these 3 steps. First, teach your child not to believe the first thought that comes to mind using the story of detectives Holmes and Holmes. Second, help them identify their ABC pattern by recording the negative event, their thoughts, and their actions. Teach them to dispute their own thinking by finding evidence that refutes it. Third, help them mitigate the situation by considering the worst, best, and most likely outcomes and making plans for each. When your child masters these self-disputation skills and uses them proficiently, they'll develop an automatic thinking style. This will significantly benefit their lifelong development, as they'll be able to immediately counter thoughts that hinder their actions, whether during exams, giving speeches, or asking someone out. They'll stop negative thoughts in their tracks, gaining immunity against pessimism, and use optimism as a weapon to face life's challenges. Imagine how proud you'll be when you can say, "My child inherited my optimism." That's the essence of this book. You can click the description below the video to find the link to the book. Welcome to read it. You can also share this book with your friends. If you like the content of Daily Book Dive, click the subscribe button to stay updated. Your encouragement helps us continue bringing book essence to our community. Congratulations, you've finished another book.